From South Carolina Public Radio, this is the South Carolina Lede. I'm your host, Gavin Jackson, and this episode was recorded on February 24th, 2025, in South Carolina Public Radio Studios here in Columbia, and this is our
600th episode of The Lede.
Wow. And we don't want to get ourselves anything special. We don't want a big deal. We're still waiting for some cards in the mail, maybe some swag in the mail, whatever, a call, whatever. We're just going to keep doing our jobs. But yes, it's been a wonderful run. Thank you all for listening. And on this episode of The Lede, we got some more for you because we're looking at the top issues poised to move this week in the Statehouse, including a different version of the school voucher bill. Senator Stephen Goldfinch continues our conversation on the $1.8 billion boondoggle / accounting discrepancy involving the state treasurer's office. I know how much you guys love some boondoggle talk, so you're going to love this interview. And Senate LCI Committee Chairman Tom Davis breaks down the energy generation needs our state faces and provides important context on this debate. So you're going to get some more details on this energy conversation that's poised to move next week. Like we said, it's our 600th episode. We've been producing this program since January 2018. We've been through it all with y'all, campaigns, pandemics, and everything in between. So give us a shout, 803-563-7169. That voicemail was created back during the pandemic in 2020. So there's a little treat. You have to call and listen to that greeting. It's a little Easter egg time capsule. But we do have a caller, I think in our wind down, who's going to say something about that greeting. We'll find out. 803-563-7169. Give us a shout. Here's to the next 600. Where will we be? Let's look at what's on tap this week at the Statehouse. It's the 7th week of the legislative session, and plenty of committee meetings are going on this week. We expect the House to debate its K-12 education voucher bill and the Senate to take up several criminal justice-related matters. We'll hear more from Senate Majority Leader Shane Massey in a moment.
Wow.
Little tease. Looking at Congress, they're in session this week as well, and House Republicans will be putting up their multi-trillion-dollar budget resolution on the floor Tuesday, as Senator Lindsey Graham watches on from the Senate. Now, there are 17 days until March 14th. What's March 14th, you ask? A, it's the Ides of March. And B, small other thing, it's when federal agencies run out of money. It's government shutdown looming. That's going to be an interesting March. Speaking of money, Richmond Federal Reserve President Tom Barkin has 2 speaking events this week that we're going to try and catch and recap for you on Saturday. We love hearing from him. He's our regional Fed president, so we get a little bit more nuanced approach to how the economy is doing in our area. And on Tuesday for the economic calendar, we get consumer confidence data. How's everyone feeling out there? Data. Thursday, we get updated GDP numbers. And on Friday, we get PCE inflation data. So, data. A lot of data this week. But let's get to it. It's week 7 of the session, and things are going a bit slow. It's your captain speaking. We got a little delay here. We're stuck on the tarmac. We're gonna turn off the no smoking sign. You guys can go ahead and let him up. Keep your seatbelts fastened. The plane is upside down. Wow, the cool pilot's back. Well, that's a little tease there, a little summation of what's happening in the Statehouse. At least that's what Senate Majority Leader Shane Massey told me last week when I asked him about the pace and how bills are moving through session from committee to the calendar to the House. But don't take my word for it. Here's Senate Majority Leader Massey.
It's going a little slow, and I knew it was going to go slow because it's the first year of a 2-year session, so things are always slow because you got to start over with everything. You got to begin the committee process. We did have a delay because of weather, so we basically lost a whole week in there that we were hoping to use for committee time, and we lost it because of the weather in January. So we're going a little slower than I would like. I don't like wasting people's time. I like moving and having things in line and being ready to go. So I'm a little bit frustrated with that. Judiciary is working better than it ever has. It's still working slow. There are things that I thought we should have had on the floor a month ago that are just now on the floor. So we'll be taking up some things now. Like next week, we're going to be taking up a couple things that were our number 2 priorities. Right? We should have already had those off. So it's moving a little bit slow. But I'm pleased with the committee work. I'm pleased that we are making progress. Things are going to pick up real quick. But it's just taking a little while longer to get moving. And it's not, part of that's our fault, but some of it's weather related, some of the other things that have been influenced out there. The other thing I'd mention is part of the slowness is the issues we're talking about this year are hard issues. Right? Energy is not something that you just, despite what we've seen, energy is not just something that you just take up and pass. The tort reform issue is not something that you can just take up and pass and not do it responsibly. So we are taking up harder issues that are going to take a little bit of time, but I do wish we could move a little bit quicker than what we have been, but we'll get there.
Massey said he hopes that H. 3309, that energy bill from the House, makes it to the floor by next week so debate can begin on it. As for what's on tap this week, he said several public safety-related bills. Take a listen.
Which has been a real issue in many other states. We haven't had as much of a problem with that in South Carolina. We have had a little bit. We're really trying to prevent it from becoming a problem in South Carolina with smash and grabs of some of the things we've seen around the country. We'll be dealing with that next week. We're also going to take another shot at fentanyl and trying to impose stiffer penalties, especially for homicide that is caused by fentanyl use and by distributing fentanyl and those types of things. Things that we hear about a lot from constituents still. So we're going to try to take up those things next week. There are a few other things on the calendar. Those were two big things that we really wanted to get to, and I'm hopeful we'll have that conversation.
That was Senate Majority Leader Shane Massey right there. And segueing into what's going on this week meeting-wise. In the Senate, the Tort Reform Bill, S-244, and the Liquor Liability Bill, S-184, are back in a Judiciary Subcommittee Tuesday afternoon. It's probably going to be full. Everyone's going to be there. On Wednesday morning, the Medical Affairs Committee will take up S-54. That's the Medical Informed Consent Act, which would prohibit employers from taking adverse action against individuals who decline to receive a vaccine. It also gives pharmacists the right to refuse to fill a prescription and also remove any ability by any government authority from requesting National Guard assistance to enforce a quarantine during a state of emergency. Now, the Attorney General's office is before a Legislative Oversight Subcommittee Wednesday morning, and there's a busy Judiciary Subcommittee that afternoon. The Treasurer's office is before a Finance Subcommittee after session on Thursday, and we will be there for that. In the House, a full Judiciary Committee meets Tuesday afternoon and takes up two bills from last week, that hands-free driving bill, H. 3276, and one dealing with additional penalties for failure to stop for blue lights, that's H. 3127, among other bills on the agenda. 3M, Ag, and LCI also meet Tuesday afternoon, and another liquor liability bill, H. 3497, is before a Judiciary Subcommittee meeting Wednesday morning. I promise you, we'll get into liquor liability and tort reform once they get to bigger committees, once they really start moving. Now, typically when we talk about the $1.8 billion accounting discrepancy /boondoggle /caper /frou-fra, hornswoggle, insert word here, you hear from Berkeley Republican Senator Larry Grooms. That's because Grooms is the chairman of the Senate Finance Subcommittee that oversees constitutional office funding requests. Also on that subcommittee is Georgetown Republican Senator Stephen Goldfinch, who was in that hearing last week with folks from the Comptroller General's office, Auditor's office, and the Treasurer's office. Now, Treasurer Curtis Loftus was on a camping trip last week, but his Chief of Staff of 11 years, Clarissa Adams, testified before the committee. Now, I was speaking with Goldfinch in the Statehouse lobby when I asked him about her testimony, which was hard to pin down at times.
I heard a lot of nonsense. She was clearly coached. She actually admitted to being coached by a crisis consulting team that the clearly state tax dollars paid for. That's a concern in and of itself. But she said a lot of nothing. We asked a lot of pertinent, substantive questions that need to be answered. She did answer a few questions that I think are not in the best interest of the treasurer. But for the most part, she avoided our questions and was clearly coached, and that's a problem.
And we're talking about Clarissa Ward, who's been at the state treasurer's office for 11 years. This problem's been going on since 2017, and it came to light when there were some changes with the Comptroller General's office, too. So tell us about this $1.8 billion, where you see this going, what more needs to be done at this point.
Well, if you want a history of the $1.8 billion, we'd be here for the next 2 hours. But basically, it was an accounting error that goes back even prior to 2017. But it appears from the documents that we have uncovered that the Treasurer's Office and the Comptroller General, the former Comptroller General, knew about the accounting error, knew that it did not actually exist, the money did not actually exist, because both of those offices had discussions on writing it down, writing it off to zero. I asked a question yesterday of Ms. Adams, if you knew going back to 2017 that you could write it down to zero and it wouldn't make any difference, doesn't that mean that you knew that the money wasn't real? and she wouldn't answer that question. So I suspect that we all know in theory now, but we'll find out in reality, that they knew going back to 17 the money wasn't real, and yet the treasurer came to us, testified behind closed doors in open session, testified last year to our subcommittee that the money existed. Not only did the money exist, that he had gotten about $225 million in interest off that money, and the General Assembly had spent that money. Mysteriously, about that same amount of money appeared in an account about that time. So, some of us are suspicious whether or not he's moved money around to try to cover up his tracks from a lie.
So then when we get to this, when you get down to it, and this money didn't exist, and there's some money that did, there's interest being generated, there's not interest being generated. We've never really got a definitive answer or like a silver bullet or a smoking gun here, but what do you think was actually happening that we're not being told happened?
Yeah, so if I had a crystal ball and I could see behind closed doors, I think when the conversion happened between the state's old accounting system and the state's new accounting system, they didn't have people in place, and certainly the treasurer is not an expert. Treasurer is not an accountant by any means. He has no expertise in accounting or in the Treasury Department. He's just an elected official. I think what happened in that conversion, there was a big giant figure that was left over. Nobody knew why, and they didn't have the expertise in-house to figure it out. So the treasurer values his image a lot, it's clear, and I think he didn't want his image to be tarnished and tainted, and so he began a cover-up campaign to try to make himself look like he knew what he was doing. And quite frankly, I don't think anybody on the subcommittee believes he knew what he was doing. It's usually not the problem or the error that gets you in trouble, it's the cover-up that gets you in trouble. But the treasurer has a duty to inform the General Assembly of any anomalies in the state's finances. A $1.8 billion anomaly is a big anomaly that needed to be reported. He didn't report it, he covered it up.
Which is the biggest concern there too, because everyone said, it's going to wash out, it's not real money, it's not a big deal, but then it never came to your attention, so the oversight there was not working the way it should. So we're talking about what more needs to be done. He wasn't before your subcommittee this week. Is he going to be before it next week? And then is he going to be under oath? What more do you need to learn from the state treasurer's office?
Well, for clarity, we asked him to come to our subcommittee. He didn't show up. He sent his staff in place, knowing that his staff was going to get grilled by us. Supposedly he's on some RV camping trip across country right now. Nobody knows where. We're going to ask him to come back probably next week, and I expect him to be there. I know the chairman expects him to be there, and at some point in time, if he decides not to show up again, he may find himself with a subpoena.
That was Georgetown Republican Senator Stephen Goldfinch talking with me for This Week in South Carolina, and we expect to see the treasurer before the subcommittee this Thursday, and we will bring you an update after that meeting. Another big interview on another big topic was one that I had with Senate Labor, Commerce, and Industry Committee Chairman Tom Davis. We were talking about energy. While that House-approved energy bill, H. 3309, is being worked on in a Senate Judiciary Subcommittee right now, Davis has been active in energy production and demand needs in the state since the VC Summer debacle back in 2017, the OG Boondoggle. Now, he's optimistic for a reboot of those two reactors and told me about his outlook here. Here's Davis.
Yeah, and this really stems back to July of 2017 when the VC Summer 2 and 3 reactor projects failed. And at that point in time, I did a deep dive into, how could that have happened? And learned more about how we generate power in South Carolina, how it's transmitted, how it's distributed. And sort of the bill that we're before us right now is the culmination of, 7.5 years worth of study into energy. And so the interesting thing is we've had a model that's been in place for about 100 years. We divided the state up into 3 geographic regions about 100 years ago. And we said to utility, we'll give you a monopoly to provide power in this area and give you a guaranteed rate of return on every dollar you invest in power production. And we needed to do that 100 years ago to bring capital to South Carolina, to bring electrical power to South Carolina. We needed to do that as an inducement. But there's a moral hazard associated with that, because if you're paying a utility a guaranteed return on every dollar they invest in generation, there is a bias toward capital-intensive projects. There's a bias toward not pursuing efficiency. There's a bias towards not doing something innovative. And so in looking at what happened in VC Summer 2 and 3 back in July of 2017, one of the things I realized was we need to bring more market pressure into the system. We need to bring more independent power producers generating power, creating competition in the production sector, making these utilities adopt best practices. So we analyzed the need for power, but also the way we provide power in South Carolina. So this House bill takes up a lot of those things. We started the debate last year on it, and it's important to kind of table set here. In terms of power generation, South Carolina has 55% of its power is nuclear. A substantial portion of its power, especially for Santee Cooper, is coal, and then third would be natural gas. We're trying to move away from coal because more carbon emissions, more toward natural gas that has less carbon emissions, and also building on our nuclear power.
And we'll talk more about this in a minute, but yes, so far they really still do need that coal production online because we are in such demand right now. Tell us about that demand, what you're hearing from folks, and when we're talking about this bill, how it might help South Carolinians. I mean, it's going to make things cheaper if we can get more energy online in the state. How does this work?
Yeah, well, first of all, we have an abundance of natural gas in the United States. And in terms of comparative advantage, you want to take advantage of that. And so given the fact that we have an abundance of natural gas in the United States, gas plants in South Carolina are part of our future. There's a joint venture proposed between Dominion and Santee Cooper that I think is going to go forward. You also have more gas being brought throughout the state. So I think, but you made a good point about coal earlier. Coal is a big part of our current power generation, and we want to move away from that. But we can't move away from it until we have substitute power. So until you bring these other forms of generation online to replace it, it doesn't make sense to talk about shutting down these coal plants. Now, that is an objective, but we got to be practical about that. You can't shut down something that's providing 30 to 35% of our power generation, because if you don't have replacement energy, people's lights aren't going to come on.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that they're looking to phase out, I think, in early 2030s when it comes to coal. And that at that point, we'll be transitioning possibly to a new gas-fired plant if that partnership goes forward with Santee Cooper and Dominion for that natural gas plant.
And you've got other, in terms of replacement energy coming online to retire these coal plants. I talked about nuclear. We're talking about VC Summer 2 and 3 and trying to complete those facilities. And I think that's very important that $9 billion was spent toward building these reactors. And then they walked away, they being SCE&G and Santee Cooper back in July of 2017, saying we couldn't finish this. One smart thing we did is said to Santee Cooper, keep that in good condition. Keep what's on the ground out there in good repair, because economic conditions may change at some point in the future that make it economically viable. And those situations have changed because there is a higher demand for power now than there was back in 2017. A lot of these big hyperscalers like Microsoft and Google and Meta, they need power generation, and they're willing to pay premium for that power generation. So the demand side of the equation has changed materially. Also, you've got federal tax credits and loan guarantees available to cover up to 40% of the cost of completing those nuclear reactors. And then thirdly, I would say that these reactors that were abandoned back in July 2017, they were brand new AP1000 Westinghouse design. We were the first ones to build it. So we encountered a lot of beta logistical problems. Since then, Georgia has completed an AP1000, China's completed 2. We now have detailed blueprints on how to complete it. So the economic conditions have changed. The circumstances are now such that it may be feasible to complete those reactors, but on these conditions, making sure it's the private sector that does it. No risk to the ratepayer, no risk to the taxpayer. If a large company wants to come along and they want to purchase the asset that's on the ground out there and use their own money to complete it, that's 2,200 megawatts of clean energy that's brought online. And it's also going to take a lot of money out of existing rate bases and lower utility bills, because a substantial portion of the $9 billion that was spent to build VC Summer 2 and 3, those are still embedded in Santee Cooper and Dominion ratepayers' base. So if we can come up with a model whereby private sector comes in and purchases that asset and completes it using totally private sector dollars, not only do we have new generation that's carbon free, but we take that sunk cost off of existing power bills.
So then do you feel comfortable in going forward with all this? I feel like a lot of people have concerns about this big bill when we were seeing it move last year, and there's even talk about it maybe taking another year to get through the whole process here, though it does seem like it's poised to move because that bill's in subcommittee this week. But when we talk about looking at the past and the Baseload Review Act and how people felt that was rushed through, and then we saw how it played out during VC Summer and back in 2017, $9 billion later. Do you feel like we are in a better place now, at least ratepayers, the state, regulators, when it comes to trying to do this again, and you can maybe even give some guarantees that we won't see another boondoggle like we saw back in 2017?
Yes, I think, and the reason is this. Since that failure in July 2017 with VC Summer, that was a wake-up call. And 170 legislators who probably, most of them, including me, didn't really understand much about power generation, transmission, distribution. We now know a lot more about it. We know a lot about the generation model. We know all about the mechanics of the industry. We understand utilities' point of view. We understand the point of view of ratepayers. So you have a more informed legislative body right now. And so it's like, you're right, with the Baseload Review Act, I was in Sanford's office as chief of staff when that was passed. And as I recall, a lot of deference was paid by legislators to utility representatives, because they're the ones that were the experts, they're the ones in the business, and so a lot of faith and trust was placed in them. So once burned, twice shy. I think this time around,
and he didn't sign that bill either.
He did not. He did not. And I was there when we made the decision not to sign that bill. But to your point, I think things are different now in that there is a lot more knowledge in the legislative body in regard to the mechanics and the procedures associated with generating power and transmitting it and distributing it. So I do think we're going to pass a good bill. I do think we're going to set the table to meet South Carolina's energy needs for generations to come. And I think we're going to introduce into the system a market dynamic to where independent power producers, if they've got a new idea, if they have an ability to generate power that's less than what the utilities cost is, that they have the ability to bring that power online and the savings get passed on to the consumer. So that's the objective here, is to provide for power, but also in a way that benefits the consumer.
That was Beaufort Republican Senator Tom Davis talking with me on This Week in South Carolina about that energy bill, H 3309, and the state of play when it comes to the state's energy needs. And that was a great chat that I hope gave all y'all some more context for this debate that is poised to happen next week in the Senate. Catch both of those full interviews on youtube.com/South Carolina ETV. You can find the podcast there too. Welcome to the wind down section, our little break from the news. We're glad you're here. A.T. Shire,
yes,
lead producer.
Yes.
Glad you're here.
Thank you so much.
Another Eagles jersey.
Here we are, baby. Here we are. Fashion alert.
Is this the last?
This
week?
isn't the last. Oh, no, sir. I have many more. A deep roster, a deep stable. Okay.
Closet.
This is a 2002 Donovan McNabb. Oh. That's right. I got this in 7th grade. I think that's 7th grade.
You were swimming in that thing. I mean, I know you were probably the same height still.
I was, but I mean, this thing is when we talked about the big ones, we were talking about this one. This one is huge, and it is only a large, but it does go down to my knees. I am 6'3" and and it's just a too big thing.
You said 2000 when?
2 or 3.
So that's a large in 2003, 2002.
It is
now. It's a small.
It is it is a large in terms of, yes, you are going to put football pads under it. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense that they sold these to the general public.
Not really.
They fit bad. They look bad. I told Gavin, if I don't wear a shirt underneath, it's perforated in a way that you just see my whole body.
Look at that. Look at your flesh-colored shirt underneath.
You are
that is my flesh.
That is flesh. Yes, that is flesh. That's what I've been saying all day. Because I didn't wear a shirt. No, I'm just kidding. I did. Anyway, Gavin, you teased it. You teased it at the top. Episode 600.
600.
We've been getting so much hate on the voicemail message, but a savior appears.
Hate on a happy day.
A light on the hill shining down. Okay, this is the first light on the 5th day. Gandalf's showing up with the Rohirrim. Okay,
I don't know this religious reference. Oh, now I know.
It's Lord of the Rings. Correct. Okay, so here we go, Gavin.
LTR.
Yep.
LTR.
This is our Gandalf. This is our Éomer showing up to bail us out at Helm's Deep. So anyway, Gavin, if you're ready, here we go.
Yes. What's that? Eye of
Sauron.
Sauron. Yeah.
Sauron.
It's so good to look at.
Hi, guys. This is Brandy from Pickens County. First of all, please don't change that voicemail greeting. That's brilliant. I've been listening for a long time and been meaning to call for like years, but, finally got around to it. I want to start by saying I love that AT is just riding, the Super Bowl win. Do you? That's really exciting. Personally, I've never cared for professional football. The night of the game, I was watching anime. But I will say, a few weeks before the Super Bowl game, I did see a piece about how the Eagles were the first professional football team to have at their stadium a sensory room for patrons and fans with sensory needs. And I thought that was just amazing. I think that we need more inclusion like that in popular leisure activities like sporting events. As someone with autistic family members and someone who works with neurodiverse populations, seeing that representation was really important to me. And so I saw that piece. I was like, you know what? Yeah, go Birds. And I was really pleased that they won. So that's exciting. Otherwise, didn't really care about football, but I'm glad that they could pull me in with that.
Go Birds.
I am really grateful for the work that you guys do for the podcast. Otherwise, I would not be nearly as informed about the comings and goings at the Statehouse. I love how you pull in what's happening nationally and how it relates to us, even globally, and how it relates to us. I am by profession a school counselor, and when you work at the intersection of mental health and public education, things lately have been a bit, can I say, scary. And so I appreciate that I can turn to you guys, to have unbiased, thorough reporting on what's happening that impacts, the people in our state and in my life. But keep up the good work. I love the podcast. You guys were the top podcast on my Spotify Wrapped for a reason. But take care. Bye.
Brandy, thank you for that call. Your first call, especially on this 600th episode. What a perfect call. What a wonderful present for us.
Perfect 600th call, Brandy. Thank you so much. If you thank us for what we do, we thank you for what you do.
Yeah, that is
as
incredible.
A listener, as a professional, everything. We love it. And I love that you came around to say, go Birds in there. That was good.
Yeah, he's like, oh, it's great that they have this sensory room. And that is wonderful. But I'm like, I tell AT, I'm like, well, they also have a little bit of a jail cell.
Yeah, they're first to have a jail cell in the stadium. But yes, the owner of the Eagles, he has an autistic brother.
Okay.
And so he has been big on autism for a very long time and spearheading a lot of that.
Incorporating that. That's smart.
Correct, yes. They do a lot with that, but they also win Super Bowls.
Hey, there you go. We got also put it on the board.
Yeah, that's what we got it.
School counselor, mental health, and public education. Woof. Thank you, Brandy, for what you do.
Truly,
that is so much.
Yes.
And a wonderful call there for our 600th. We didn't stage that.
No.
I wish we could have. We couldn't have done better.
Maybe I
one.
saved it for a few days just knowing that Brandy did like the voicemail greeting. Did I save it? I did. I saved it, okay? I admit it.
Oh, yeah. So, had a wonderful weekend.
I love that for
My
you.
brothers were in town.
Yes.
My fraternal twin brother and my elder brother, he was born in May, we were born in July, so you all do the math on that one there. Irish triplets, if you will. Wonderful weekend. Celebrating my father's 70th birthday.
What a
the
man.
father, the creator of the podcast, who I inherited.
Founder of the podcast, South Carolina Lede, LTD, because it is British.
Lead Limited.
Yes.
He's like, you can name it whatever you want, but just got to put the LTD.
We're incorporating in the UK, all right?
Well, it was a good tax shelter for a while there in
for a
Ireland,
long
but,
time.
No,
We've ruined all that.
Wonderful weekend, good time for them to visit. They got to, come and experience my life for about a day. Mm-hmm. It's just funny because, you're just so used to living in your own little world. And then Colin's like, how do you live like this?
He saw the pulp in the washing machine.
It's like, why is there so much pulp in your dryer?
Yeah, well, you wouldn't understand.
And I said, do you need to clean your clothes?
I'm an environmentalist, okay? Yeah. That's called environmentalism. All right?
But he also brought me, I got him some Korean skincare for Christmas. That's my gift.
Yeah.
Because I have mission accomplished to an extent with my brothers actually paying attention to their skin a little bit more.
Over the years, your skin has maintained and theirs has deteriorated.
And they've realized, and I think they've come around. I'm not making a big deal, but I'm like, Nick, he used to have the driest legs. I'm like, just put some lotion
Dry legs?
And he's like, yeah, I used to scratch all the time. I'm like, I can see why. I can see the dry skin. I'm like, just put something there. He's like, I don't like the way it feels in the shower. Now,
don't do it in the shower.
Or after, but what
the heck?
And then so now he's come around. He's like, oh, it's so much better. But I still instinctively scratch. But he's like, everyone's
learned.
Everyone's using SPF. We're getting better. So it takes time to make your agenda work. But if you work at it,
you just keep doing that subliminal messaging, the subliminal Gavin showing off his legs constantly. He doesn't wear socks just to do this.
Just in case someone peeps an ankle and says, "My goodness, how supple."
Those aren't dry. I'd even call them wet.
They'll see my beautiful varicose veins.
Oh yeah.
Thanks, Mom and Dad.
Yeah, Gavin. He's very tuned into his own veins.
Oh, the vein structure.
He's mentioned how unveiny my legs are before. It's very weird. You got nothing. He's like, you got nothing to worry about. That's what he said.
Slaps out of the car. These babies are good for another couple.
Oh, you got nothing to worry about here.
Gosh, we were talking about the Achilles too, and I was like, oh God, my baby AT.
Yep, the incident. Listeners, year-old listeners, episode 600, many mentions of the incidents, okay? That is when I tore my Achilles because of Gavin and Vince Colblugo. It was tough, but we've made it this far. I have a child now.
You can golf again. Joy has returned to your life.
Yes.
Colin played lacrosse, and in high school and college.
You guys got the hair for it. You got the hair for it.
lettuce was flowing.
Yeah,
and now Nick's kids, my God, comes with the haircut.
It does.
But so he's always been athletic and knows how to you got to stretch like this, do this, like the little things that make the big differences. But he was telling me about how he's doing like this Achilles stretch, and I was like, oh, I need that because I get out of bed every morning.
Tight.
And there's and I'm like, easy.
You see me on the ground.
I say easy.
You see me writhing on the ground, blacked out from pain.
The terror. There's the eyes that will haunt me forever.
Do you remember when I tried to take a step on it and you were like, that's a bad idea? I go, I got to test it. Nope.
We were playing kickball. For people that don't know the whole story, it was a short-lived kickball
Vince
team.
Colblugo had
ATV.
3 errors in 1 inning at first base, and Gavin goes, "Hey, T, get out here and play this." And then tear. Yeah, real bad.
He had a bad push-off. We made a great double play at home.
Yeah.
I'll say that. I was there.
I got one person out.
Yeah.
And then it fell on my face, torn Achilles.
Saying,
Yeah.
who threw a rock at me? And people actually die from that injury. You can die
Rocks?
from that. From rock. Well, yes, rocks too, but no, the Achilles.
Yeah, no, it's terrible.
That would have been, yeah.
It was immense pain. I was blacked out. I remember standing, and then I remember just being on the ground. I don't remember falling. But this show has to end. It has to end. The producer and me is screaming. It's been over 9 minutes. We got to end this one. We got to just do the outro.
I know.
Do the outro.
We get too wound up. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you made it this far, thank you for sticking around. Be like Brandy. Give us a shout. 803-563-7169 as our celebration of 600 continues. And if you don't want to call us, you can always leave us a little review on Apple Podcasts. Helps people find us. You can also stay up to date with the latest news on scetv.org and southcarolinapublicradio.org. And don't forget to support your local newspapers. The South Carolina Lede is a production of South Carolina Public Radio. Our producer is A.T. Shire. Amy Crouch is our supervising producer. Sean Birch is our executive producer. This podcast is produced with support from PRX and is made possible in part by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, as well as listener contributions to the ETV Endowment of South Carolina. For the South Carolina Lede, I'm Gavin Jackson. Be well, South Carolina.
Episode 600, you're going to do this?
Can I offer you
A butter dish in these trying times?